Welcome to the Sport Exchange with me, John Robbie. Hi guys, it's John Robbie here. Welcome to the Sport Exchange podcast where we meet celebrities and personalities from different sports. We hear their stories, the good, the bad and the ugly, and learn how they deal with the transition from playing to enjoying the rest of their lives. Each week I'll discuss my most recent article and we hope to have a lot of fun. Enjoy. Nominated determinism is when someone's name suits their job. Well, today we welcome one of the best examples in the world of sport, the team principal of Team Dimension Data for Quebec, the professional cycle team, Doug Ryder. Doug, you've never heard that before. Welcome.
Thank you very much. No, never.
Do you ever grow tired of the joke, Ryder, being the manager of a cycling team?
Yeah, they think it's a pseudonym, but no, I mean, it's, I get it all the time, although it's dying as time goes on.
I'm not so sure. Cycling, it's obviously been a total love affair with you. Where did it start?
So, I mean, I was a young boy in Cape Town and, riding in Cape Town, just to get away and I guess, be free. The bicycle gives you so many opportunities to just, to be independent and to just be out there and do your own thing. I was always someone that loved to be on my own and to do something that was a bit different. And if you think in Cape Town with the Cape Town cycle tour that has been going on for many, many years, coming literally past my doorstep, just something that I just, love to want to be a part of and do. And there was actually once a report tour that came down into Cape Town and there were some stages in Cape Town and my uncle was quite interested in cycling at the time. And so he got me to go and visit the guys at the team hotel and I was 12 years old. And then, the bug bit, I guess. And then I started riding, from then onwards. And
you've never lost it or it's never lost you?
No. And no, not at all. I mean, I worked really hard through school and I went to an all boys school. So, doing
what school were you?
I went to Saks.
Right.
In Cape Town. So doing a sport that was outside of the school sports was frowned upon. So I used to play rugby in the mornings and then go and race Saturday afternoons in the kind of the provincial races. And, if you have a few hard tackles in the morning, you kind of don't perform so well on a bike. And then I eventually stopped school sport and then did this full time and went to the Olympics in 1996. And I think that's where the dream of taking an African team to the Tour de France really kind of was born.
It's kind of sad that until your name came up, Ryder, with Dimension Data or MTN, Quebec, I mean, I'd never heard of you. And yet you'd captained the national side for many years. You'd gone to the Olympics. You'd won big races and so on. Yeah. It must have been depressing not being part of a sexy sport in terms of the South African nation.
No, it is quite sad. I mean, there's lots of sports
in those days, because we'll talk about the change. Yeah.
No, I mean, it's, if you weren't part of the big sports, and I guess the national sports, then you didn't really get any focus or any attention. So, in those days when we went to world championships and to, not Olympic games, but I mean, world championships, you had to fund yourselves. The federation didn't have the funding to do it and there was not really any support. So
how did you do that? I mean, did you sell lemonade outside the door?
I actually was a waiter in a restaurant in Cavendish Square in Cape Town. So I waited and funded myself too. So
international sportsman, Olympic athlete, working as a waiter to fund yourself.
Correct.
How do you feel? Are you bitter?
No, I used to cut myself big slices of cake, so after training in the mornings. No, look, I mean, it was just at that time. I mean, if you were bitter about it, you didn't move forward. So, I mean, it was just one of those things that you had to do, I guess. But, I mean, now, I was never able to ride. I mean, the dream was to ride at the Tour de France, and I was never able to do that. It was the late 90s and early 2000s, and so then I thought if I wasn't able to get there on my own and to do it as a cyclist, then maybe I can help South Africans and Africans get there and build something that that can show that Africa deserves to be in cycling and deserves to be at the highest level in the world tour of cycling.
So, as somebody who would rather watch paint dry than watch cycling, or was like that.
Yes.
And then when they started showing regularly the Tour de France, I fell in love with France.
Yeah.
And would never miss the tour now because somehow the cycling and the villages and the castles and so it's just so magical. Yeah. How does cycling work other than the Tour de France? Because I think so many people love the Tour de France and don't know anything else about it. Is it possible to explain the world of professional cycling in a short time? How does it actually work?
Well, I mean, most people think I have the best job in the world. I only work 21 days in July, but it's not the case. I mean, we race 273 race days a year. And, We have 70 odd people, 27 cyclists, and the rest are staff that travel around the world from January to October. I mean, we booked 990 aeroplane tickets last year. There isn't a sports team or a sporting code that plays more matches or races in more events than we do in a calendar year. It's such a hard sport, and the workload is huge.
Is that purely to give the sponsors their pound of flesh? I mean, that can't be healthy for cyclists to cycle so often.
Yeah, I mean, so each individual rider will race up to 90 days, so 90 days a year, and the rest is training and building, their condition to get, to be good at the races that they focus on. But a team of 27 riders racing mostly a dual program. So we'll race in 2 different places at the same time. Like we start in Slovenia now, and we're racing the Dauphiné at the same time. So we race 2 different parts of the world at any given point in time for a whole year.
Now, what is the Dauphiné? I know that name, but what is that?
So that's the final real build-up race for the Tour de France. And it's a race in France organized by the same organizer, the ASO, that organizes the Tour de France. It's a World Tour race. So us as being a World Tour team, there's only 18 in the first division of World Cycling.
So it's like the Premier League.
Correct. We have to do like 150 odd days a year of racing, which is the World Tour events. It's about 150 days, which includes the 3 Grand Tours, the Tour de France, Giro d'Italia, Vuelta a España, and many other races. And then we do about another 100 days outside of that, smaller races outside of the World Tour that helps, bring on younger riders, give them, the opportunity to succeed and to show what they can do, and then, to prepare for the World Tour races and ultimately the Tour de France.
Put it into perspective. I mean, a kid from Cape Town growing up in, I suppose, the changeover into the new South Africa, but still sport was perhaps rooted in the old South Africa.
Yeah.
To have started a team that now races in the Tour de France, what sort of an achievement is that? Put it into perspective without being modest.
Yeah, it's never been done before. So it was the first. There'd never been an African registered team in this is the 105th year of the Tour de France this year, and there'd never been an African team ever in the Tour de France, an African registered, African sponsored African team. And so, yeah, it had never been done before. So, and we had nobody that we could really look at and look to that, to help us get there. There was Team Barloworld, but that was a British registered, South African sponsored Italian team. So kind of, they kind of had their feet in the Mediterranean and they had everything around them. But, we wanted to do something that had never been done before. And I guess that's...
Take us to the stages, because I know you started your own team, the Ryder cycling team, and then there were various phases before Dimension Data came in. I mean, break it down to us. When did you decide to start your team, and what were your immediate goals?
So I went to the Atlanta Olympic Games in 1996, and Josiah Togwani won gold in the Olympic.
You roomed with him, didn't you?
Yeah, in the Olympic marathon. So he was there. Yeah,
tell us about that. Let's break.
No, I mean it was only 86 of us, 86 athletes at that time in Atlanta, and so it was a very intimate group of individuals, and we just did amazing things that year, I think, in the Olympic Games. And it was the first professional and amateur Olympic Games, because before that in Barcelona, the Olympic Games was ultimately only amateur.
Shamateur, yeah.
Yeah. And then, in 1996 for, even in the cycling event that I was in, Lance Armstrong was there, Miguel Indurain, all the big names at that time. And it was the late 90s. So it was like kind of like racing motorbikes. In terms of where cycling was at that point. But, when Josiah Togwani won gold in the marathon, then I realized that if Africa can develop the best endurance runners, then why not cyclists? And then post that, going through Africa and realizing that there aren't any bicycles in Africa. Yeah. And why is that? I mean, if you look at the bicycle and you think, it's such a great tool for mobility to get people around, and they, if it was like a status symbol. If you own a bicycle, you're too poor to own a car, so you'd rather walk. So then we thought if we could create this African legend, this icon on a bike, at the highest level in the world, at the Tour de France, and make the bicycle cool for the African continent, then people will want it. And then it won't be a status symbol. It'll be something that could potentially mobilize the African continent.
Was this a revelation, a flash, or was this something that came to you and became this dream?
Well, it was just something that we really wanted to do, and something that I thought, I was coming to the end of my career, I guess, and my international career. I'd lost my contract in America when I was, after that Atlanta Olympic Games, came back to South Africa in 1997. I mean, I was 26, so I was still young, and then started my own team. Started working in corporate. And
what did you do in corporate?
So I got a job at Lotus Development as a software company that was then bought by IBM. And so I worked there for 6 years.
How did you enjoy that?
Yeah, I loved being in the corporate world, actually. And so I spent 10 years or 11 years working in corporate. I spent 5 years at Microsoft post that, and they sponsored our cycling teams. So we had an IBM Lotus cycling team and then a Microsoft cycling team with local talent. In fact, Daryl Impey, who's now leading and is wearing the yellow jersey in the Criterium de Dauphiné today, is was on our team at that time and on the Microsoft teams as a young boy. And, it was all about, wanting to get the riders international experience. So ultimately, we wanted to be the best team in South Africa, then the best team in Africa, and then take on the rest of the world. And so I spent 11 years in corporate building relationships because when I started at Lotus, I didn't even know how to turn on a computer. In those days, it was like, I never studied when I finished school. I went to the army and then post that went, worked as a waiter, saved up money, and then went to Europe on my own. And
did that worry you? I know I was an amateur rugby player, but I had to have a job, to pay the bills, etc. But thankfully, there always was that career, and then I fell into radio. There was always that career that was building in parallel. Yeah. Now, for something like cycling, obviously you have to be 100% committed. Yeah. Given the situation in South Africa at the time, given the fact you were coming to the end of your professional career, you had this dream, etc., did it concern you that you hadn't really considered what was going to happen afterwards, or were you confident you'd be able to see your dream through?
Well, you always hope. I've always been a guy that never has a plan B, because then you take your eye off the ball for plan A, which is not always the best way to do things.
Would you advise anyone else that
No, not
approach?
really. But if you believe in yourself, then then most times, and if you're a good person and you do good things, most times things will work out. But when I started and when I left to Europe, I said, if I'm not making enough money by the time that I'm 25 or 26, then I'll have to get a job. So that was the kind of the line in the sand that I'd drawn. And when I was racing in Europe, I literally was racing hand to mouth. You were racing to earn prize money so that you could have dinner.
How much did you make? How much did you make at the level you were racing?
So I raced on a professional team in America in 1995 and 1996, and they wrote me a check every month for $100 a month.
You're kidding.
Yeah.
I was earning more than that playing amateur rugby.
I earned $100, and I before. Yeah, I was like, why did you even write a check? Because it cost me money to go and bank it. It was like ridiculous.
So it wasn't really professional.
No
cycling.
No, I was a South African, and so for them it was easy to abuse and have a free rider, pretty much, that they just paid a pittance to. And then I stayed with a teammate in a trailer park in Pennsylvania, which was pretty interesting too. Only had my bike stolen once, so that wasn't
trailer
so bad.
Trash.
Yeah, trailer park trash.
Did you ever doubt? There must have been low points as well. Injuries, lack of success, whatever.
I was always lucky in my career that I never really had huge issues, because I had no medical cover at that time either. So it was kind of
even within the team.
Even within the team. Yeah.
So you were basically slaves to your obsession.
And slaves to your passion, correct? Yeah. So it was. But it was an amazing time. I met amazing people, raced in incredible races. The biggest race in America, the Tour de Pont at that time, which Armstrong won, 2 years in a row. And then it was an interesting point in cycling. At the end of 96, Armstrong got testicular cancer. And so, that was when cycling was pretty much getting turned on its head. And
was everybody doping in those days?
I think so.
Did you ever?
No, never. And I don't know for sure, but when I was racing in Europe in the late 90s with some guys from South Africa that went to Europe, it was hard. And we were good. Or we thought we were good, and then we went there and we, literally pinned our ears back and we're just hanging on.
And would you, as a professional cyclist, know? I'm very good friends with David Walsh.
Yes.
From way back when he was a cub reporter and I was a young rugby player. We're actually very, very good mates. And when he came up, and he was the world's greatest fan of Lance Armstrong, and he was the guy who motivated Paul Kimmage, another cyclist, to become a journalist. Paul, a very, very honest and decent guy. So when David Walsh realized at a certain stage that Lance Armstrong could not be doing what he's doing without cheating, and it actually broke David's heart, because Lance Armstrong was his hero. As cyclists, you must have looked at other cyclists and said, these guys cheating?
Yeah, I mean, at the time, you didn't know, right? Because we came from South Africa, from a continent and a country that wasn't in cycling, and we went to Europe. And so when you see them and how fast they were riding, and none of us were really on teams where you were kind of, it was forced on you, or where you saw it, with your own eyes. So we never really saw anything. We were just getting beaten up every single day, and then.
But
we
surely professional cyclists talk about it. They
so
have to, keep it quiet, otherwise the whole thing collapses.
It was super hard.
You sound almost too naive.
No. I mean, it was super hard at that time for us to even break into those teams and even to break into the sport. And that's why when I left cycling, let's say European cycling, I mean, I still raced on the national team, but when I left that part of cycling in 1997 and came back and started my own team in South Africa, it was it was probably the best thing. And that I guess it just fell into place that it was, the best thing that happened to me to get a job, to work for 11 years, to try and build the network and the relationships to bring our own team into cycling. And I'm glad I didn't run a team in those days because we wouldn't have been able to compete ethically.
Is it clean now? I mean, Chris Froome, someone I have the greatest respect for. I remember interviewing him, from Kenya, St. John's College here, etc. And I know the person who introduced him to cycling, the teacher he had at St. John's. I want to believe he's clean. I so do. And then already there are question marks coming up now over stuff that he's taken. When we look at cycling now, is it clean?
Well, knowing what we're doing in our team and the success that we've had in the last 5 years, I absolutely think so. I mean, we're 100% clean and ethical team. And when I look at how well we've competed against the best teams in the world with our African riders, because we still almost 50% of the makeup and the riders in our team are from Africa, then absolutely. I mean, we would never be able to compete if it was still, rife in the peloton. So from our point of view, absolutely. I mean, there might be the odd, person that's still taking chances and they get tested and things do happen. There's still some Italians that, that test positive to last year before the Giro d'Italia. And, but I mean, I think the testing protocols now and everything and the blood passport program is so good that, that I believe that it's, that it's totally.
Have you ever had a rider who tested positive in your team?
No, we haven't. No.
And what would you do if you did? You'd be gone?
Oh, absolutely. No, absolutely. And I mean, our contracts are very specific with our riders and with our sponsors around that. So no, completely. I mean, it would be the end of the team, pretty much.
We're talking to Doug Ryder. Go back to Josiah Tugwani. You became friends? Are you still friends with him?
No. I mean, it was 20 odd years ago, but no. So it was just at that time such a close group of individuals, and it was amazing to see the success. I mean, in 1992, the marathon runners got so they were staying in the Olympic Village in Barcelona, and they just ate all the food, and they loved the fact that there was food 24 hours a day in the Olympic Village. And so when they got to the marathon, none of them could finish. And in 1996 they stayed outside, and then came in at the last minute, and then then he won, which was just epic. And sadly, he never really did much post that. But it was such a fantastic way to end those Olympic Games. Penny Haynes did so well that year. So we had it was just an amazing group of people that
and Sascock has been hammered, and we know there's been a big inquiry and all sorts of stuff. And the way they've treated some sports people, I think of the hockey players, for example, and other players, where they seem more intent on stopping people going to the Olympics than getting them there. Do you have thoughts on them? So I mean,
Sascock, I think, should have had some changes in their people, over the last 20 odd years. But, sport is so big in this country, and we love it. It drives us and it connects us and unites this country, when we do great things. And it's just surprising for me that, we haven't been able to retain major sponsors, for the Olympic team and for Sascock, and that we haven't been able to, and we don't incentivize and keep our players.
The problem, Doug, is Sascock. Because I know that sponsors have wanted to come in. For example, the hockey, I think it was Barlow World, wanted to come in and look after all of hockey. But Sascock said, no, we want the money. And as a result, people said, we don't basically trust you, So, I mean, it's not the want of sponsors. It's the organization, isn't it?
Yeah, for me, it's around the, I guess the people that have been able to, try and retain and attract, and also, partners, and then also the fact that they don't value, I think, in totality, the individuals and the players and the sports the sporting codes to the level that they should and give them the opportunity that they need. In Atlanta at that time, all the hockey players and the rowers and all those guys and girls, they had full-time jobs. It wasn't even professional sport for them, and they did, because none of them earned enough to be able to do that. They all had other jobs, which was pretty hectic.
Tell us about winning on Mandela Day, winning that stage.
Yeah,
take us through it for those people who don't know. Take us through it.
So I think, on the 14th of January that year, 2015, we were told that via an SMS from Christian Prudhomme that we were in the Tour de France. So, that's my Valentine's Day. It's a month early. But, that was the greatest day for us because we'd worked so hard for 3 years or 2.5 years to show ourselves in the world of cycling and to get
What got you in? Was it standard or was it money or was it sponsorship?
So it was quite funny. This is an interesting story. In 2012, I was an invited guest to the Tour de France by Pat McQuaid, the current then president of the UCI. On the final in Paris on the Champs-Élysées, and I was a guest with ASO and with the UCI, and then I met with the ASO to propose because we were building our team and we were registering as a pro-continental team, a second division team for 2013. And I went to Christian Prudhomme, Bernard Hinault, Jan Lemoyne, all the guys from the ASO in their suits, 5, 6 of them in a meeting, and there was me on my own representing Africa and South African cycling to say that this is our plan. We want to come to the Tour de France. And they're like, when? So I said, no, we only have funding for 3 years. So it has to happen in 3 years. And they're like, you mad? So I said, what do you mean I'm mad? How cool is this? Cycling needs a good news story. And they said, but there aren't any Africans in cycling. So I said, I know. How cool is that? So they said, it's not going to happen. You're on a 10-year plan. It's never going to happen in 3 years. So I said, yeah, I'll see you later. And then anyway, that was our first meeting because we wanted to go to the guys that make the decisions in terms of the biggest race in the world. You want to meet them and understand what was possible. And then we raced really hard 2013, 2014. Rode a really good Tour of Spain, the Vuelta a España in 2014 as a team. And then post that we did enough for them to say, okay, that would be cool to bring, this African team as a wildcard team into 2015. We heard on the 14th of January, and then we started to build for the 2015 Tour de France, planned our team around, African riders. And then, of course, Steve Cummings, was also in the team and, he just joined us and then he won on Mandela Day. But on that day, on that morning, we, I spoke on the team bus. I very rarely speak to the riders because I have sports directors that do that. And on Mandela Day, I went and sat on the team bus and chatted to the riders. We presented them with special helmets, orange helmets in the color of harmony and the color of Mandela Day with, make every day a Mandela Day, printed on those helmets. And I spoke to them about the significance of this, about the significance of Nelson Mandela, how, he believed that sport has the power to do good and to unite people and to do things like that.
Sport has the power to change the world, is what he said. Yeah,
absolutely. So had that conversation with them. We are Laureus ambassadors as well. It was quite a big thing. And then,
what was their reaction? Did you feel it in that room, on that bus?
Yeah, it was unbelievable. In fact, when I walked off the bus, that there was so many reporters around our team because of that day and because it was Mandela Day, and we put some stuff out on social media about what we were going to do. And I when I walked off and I spoke to the reporters and the media, I was like, I actually would not want to race our team today because they just looked like they were in it to win it completely. And then that day, when Steve won that stage into Mende, and this year, there is a stage that finishes in Mende again, so in the Tour. And that day, Steve was away with 2 French riders who had finished 2nd and 3rd in the Tour de France the year before, and the French president visited that day. So it was probably the biggest day for the French, and then Steve won, and everybody was so happy, about that victory. It was brilliant.
How did you feel when he crossed the line?
No, you couldn't believe it. I was on the team bus. So I wasn't in the team cars behind the riders, and I was just watching it on the team bus on this airstrip because it finished on an airfield, on this airstrip with all the buses, and I just couldn't believe it. And when he crossed the line, and then I ran out of the bus and we hugged him, and he was crying, and it was just incredible. It was his first Tour de France stage win too, so it wasn't like he does this at will.
Well, put that in perspective, because I never realized that if you win a stage of the Tour de France, your name is up in lights for the rest of time.
Yeah.
You've won a stage of the Tour de France. I think non-cyclists or non-cycling fans don't realize how big that is. Explain how a stage works, how the domestiques work for the stars and the sprint and so on. Give us the way you plan the stage and and some of the decisions that have to be made?
So every team has its goals and its strategy for a Tour de France. So they have a plan. There's so many different competitions that you can race for. So there's not all the 22 teams that race the Tour de France go for the yellow jersey. So Sky goes solely for that. They don't worry about stage wins. They might win some along the way, but it's all about, conserving time and trying to win it overall. Our strategy, for the last 3 Tour de France's has been to focus on the individuals and to try and win stages, to show we don't have a guy that can win overall yet. That's part of our plan. But right now it was all about focusing on the individual stages. So when they announced the route in October at the Palais de Congrès on the Champs-Élysées in Paris, every October they announced the route of the Tour de France. Then from that day, we look at the riders that we have in our team, we look at the route, and then we take our 27 riders and we bring them down to about 13 or 14 that potentially could do something in the Tour de France. And then we focus those 13 or 14 riders, of which we finally select the final 8, literally a week before, because people.
What is it like for the guys who get left out? It must be devastating.
No, it's totally devastating. I mean, for them, sometimes they honestly think their life is over because, as I said, it's every childhood dream, cyclist's dream to want to ride.
Do you make the announcement?
So, I have lots of sports directors and coaches, and then I'm the swing vote if there's a contentious decision around which one we bring into the team. But ultimately, I would make the final decision. Correct. And
do
then,
you phone them individually, or
so the sports directors do?
Yeah.
I don't do that. Because each rider reports into a director. So we have 4 directors, and so there's 7 to 8 riders that report into the directors. So they're kind of their bosses in the team. And so it's, those are the ones that have a very close relationship with the riders. And so those are the ones that then ultimately break the news. But some riders get a feeling and know whether they're on the chopping block or, on the cusp. We have one South African rider that is, a potential in or out, and it'll change his life forever just to start. This individual in our team, but it's hectic, and it's a hard decision to make. And you can see the guys, because then they eventually, during the when they don't ride the Tour de France and they go to the Tour of Austria, because we do that at the same time as the Tour is on, and it's only 8 days the Tour of Austria, but you can just see how hard it is for them to go to a Tour of Austria when they're on the short
playing for the dirt trackers on a rugby tour. Okay, so you've picked your team, you've looked at the various things. Then tell us about planning a stage. I mean, do you look at and say, this is what we are going to do and stick to it? Presumably you have to react to what other teams do, breakaways, etc.
So we focus on the stages that we think that we can be good at. So I mean, that stage in Taman that Steve Cummings won in the 2015 Tour de France, we planned that stage for him. So the whole team raced to make sure that he was in the breakaway, that he could then break the breakaway and then win from the breakaway. So that stage was planned. And how do we plan that? We go and video the whole stage. So we physically drive it. So we drive 3,500 kilometers of the Tour de France and literally recce every single stage that we want to focus on. And we go into intimate detail, the altitude, the percentage gradient of the climbs, and then we feed that back into the riders, and then they train it, and they often train those stages to be the best that they can be at that. And then we have a proper plan that morning, look at the wind direction, look at the weather and all that kind of stuff, and look at where the rest of the racing teams are at, and then plan it accordingly. So it's incredibly technical.
If there's a breakaway, if a rider's, who makes the decision how to react?
So the sports directors and the team cars have all the information. They know exactly where the riders are at any given point in time during a stage. And but on the meeting in the bus the morning of, we go into absolute detail, wind direction, what is going to happen potentially. We've got very experienced sports directors that have done many and multiple Tour de France's, so we leverage the experience of the individuals that we have in the team, and then the whole team supports it. So if a Steve Cummings potentially would miss the breakaway, then the guys would bring him across and make sure that he gets there. And that's kind of, everybody's into it, every other teammate is into it, because they get the chance when it's their stage that everybody commits to them. So that was 2015, in those days. And then when Mark Cavendish joined us in 2016.
Tell us about that, because I believe he approached you.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was unbelievable.
And this is one of the greatest cyclists in the world.
Yeah, he's the most winning of all cyclists in the world that's still riding today. So it was quite funny, actually. After the day after the 2015 Tour de France, with me having a slight hangover after such a great, we were the best wildcard team ever. Africans came, from all over Europe and came to stand on the side of the road and support us. And Mark Cavendish's agent contacted me and said, that Mark Cavendish, he said, asked me, are you still in Paris? And I said, yes. And he says, well, Mark Cavendish is staying in a hotel just off the Champs-Élysées. He'd like to meet you today. So I said, okay, cool. And why? No, he's really interested. He's tired of this Belgian team that he's racing on, and he's really interested in joining your team. So then I was like, oh, wow, that's pretty interesting. So I went to go and see him at his hotel. And we chatted for about...
Lionel Messi approaching you and saying, I want to play for your football team.
No, I mean, it was unbelievable. I thought I was still hungover. But, then I sobered up very quickly. But then, meeting with him for 2 hours on, in his hotel, was brilliant. And he just said, Doug, I've never seen a team like yours. Everybody loves this team. The whole world loves the team.
So it wasn't just about money?
No, it was not about money, actually. He came to our team for 20% less than what he was earning and committed so much to us. There was no other team in cycling that he wanted to ride for, which was unbelievable.
It's just because, I don't know if it's and I'm not being rude, a marketing strategy that with the Quebec,
yes,
a higher purpose, that you're riding for a higher purpose, or is that genuine?
No, it is. It's absolutely genuine. There's no window dressing about it. I mean, it's the one thing that gets us up every single day. And it's the one thing that I said to Mark. I said, Mark, the challenge and the struggle that I find with all sportsmen is it's all about what is in it for me?
Mm.
How much do I earn, my social life, who I engage with, and it's such a, top sportsmen are the hardest people to live with, be with, and connect with, because they are so insular and so focused on themselves. And I said, well, Mark, our team is different. So, while you're racing and you're still in the media's eye, you can do such good for somebody else and leave a legacy in the sport that you would only realize once you've finished. And then your phone doesn't ring anymore, because then you're phoning people to try and make a difference. Now, while you're in the limelight, why not do something that's uniquely different and have a purpose that gets you up every single morning when times are tough? Because it's not about you. It's not about you looking good in Lycra, every single day. It's about what you can do for others. And I said, for me as the team owner, 50% of your value is on the bike and 50% is off the bike.
And has he bought into that?
Completely. He's been with us 3 years. This is his third year with us.
What about when he left to go to the Olympics? Was that an issue?
No, that was something that we discussed and planned for him, because in the end, this team was built on a dream. And so when we look at the individuals on the team that want to join us, we look at what they still want to achieve, because this is not about putting square pegs in round holes. If you want to get the best out of a sports person and an individual in a sport like cycling that is so diverse, so hard, that's not played in a stadium with a whole lot of other people, which is, and it's about that drive and that passion. If you try and realize their dreams, then you'll get the best out of them. And of course it needs to tie into our strategy and what we're about. But
so it's a combination of the collective and the individual
correct.
dreams.
So then Mark, bought into that. And funny enough, post that conversation 2 days later, MTN, put in the newspaper that they were no longer going to continue supporting our cycling team into the future. Their contract was up for renewal anyway. I mean, they'd been with us for 8 years. It was an amazing partnership, and they took Africa's team to the Tour de France, and then they didn't want to continue, beyond that. And then I phoned Mark immediately, and I said, Mark, I actually don't have a sponsor for next year, so I think you should, stick around where you are. And he was like, no, Doug, I believe that you'll find something and you'll do the right thing. I'm 100% committed. And I was like, oh my gosh, now I really have to make this happen, because, the trust that he showed, then, and the loyalty when I'd only met him for 2 hours was...
Isn't that amazing? Tell us about Nicholas Dlamini. How good is he?
Yeah, he's...
I think he got injured, is that right?
He's a bit sick at the moment.
Yeah, or sick,
But he's, he'll bounce back, but he's amazing. I mean, he's that cradle to the Holy Grail story. He comes from, from a community in Cape Town, and not from much. I mean, his mom is a domestic worker. I mean, he's just the most incredible guy, and he's now potentially going to be I guess the first, Black South African in the Tour de France in the next few years.
Isn't that brilliant? Well, tell us about cycling here, because I know that, and let me declare that the Sport Exchange has been working quite hard to bring about a tour of South Africa along the lines of the Tour of Britain and we've got everything lined up except the political will. How important is it to have a serious tour here, and what could it do for the sport and for the country?
No, I mean, it's critical. South Africa is the only country, or one of the few countries in Africa, that doesn't even have a major cycling event, which is amazing. That if you think it can happen in Rwanda, in Eritrea, in Morocco, in Uganda.
I believe cycling in Rwanda has gone bananas.
Completely bananas. It's absolutely unbelievable. Thanks to a guy that we had on our team for 10 years, Adrian Nyonshuti, and the investment that Jock Boyer and people like that have invested and made into Rwandan cycling. I mean, that is one of the leaders of cycling in the African continent now, and they're doing so well. And it does come around a major event, because that's the aspiration. That's what opens, kids' eyes to the possibility and showcases the sport at the highest level.
And the tourism to the country could
totally
boom. I mean, think of the coverage.
Yeah. But I mean, from my point of view, selfishly, we want to open that door for individuals that potentially haven't seen cycling and don't know that cycling is a sport. I mean, the bicycle is not just a tool to get you from A to B. It's actually a profession. And so when we've obviously supported and partnered with the Quebec charity, and when our riders
How many bikes have you given away?
So Quebec has done 86,000 since inception, since 2004. Part of our plans is to go beyond 100,000 by 2020, which I think we'll do fairly easily. But I mean, it's just incredible what has happened, and it's also one of the best stories that really hasn't been told well, because we're not in it for marketing. We're in it because we really believe in the power of the bicycle and what it can do,
change lives,
and how we can change lives. I mean, our whole Bicycles Change Lives campaign is exactly that, and that's why Tour of South Africa or the like would be just absolutely incredible. And if you go through communities and get kids to see that, that the sport is so cool and that they can earn a living off a bicycle, then we will change the perception.
We need to get Cyril Ramaphosa
on
off his walks and onto a bike. Well, let's hope the sports minister is listening. How's the team at the moment? You've had some injuries this year, etc. In terms of sponsorship, are you looking for more Dimension data? What's the story?
So, our team has struggled this year. We've had, at one point in time, 11 riders off and out, which is crazy. I mean, I think I should have invested in a wing of a hospital. But, we've had a tough time. We've actually, even when I go to races, the sports directors of other teams are like, we're so sad for you, because, everybody loves this team and wants it to be successful, knowing, why we exist, I guess. But, it has been tough. So we're hoping that now, as we build to the Tour de France, that our season will turn around and that we can, stand tall on the podium and do great things, which I'm sure we will. So
and the sponsorship, is that tight?
Yeah, Dimension data has been amazing. When MTN, decided not to continue with us, then, Jeremy Ord and his team got behind it. They love cycling. They love the fact that it can tell the story and they can partner with the ASO and the Tour de France.
I'm surprised Jeremy didn't want a place in the team. He loves cycling so much, eh?
Yeah, no, he's a passionate cyclist, but they, from a business point of view, it's been amazing for them in terms of their relationships and talking about the data side of it. So they've really leveraged that part of it, and they've done an amazing job with that. But, Dimension Data has committed to us for the future, to our 2020 strategy of trying to win the Tour de France with an African rider. And that's great. But of course, we always are looking for significant partners to get involved, with us and to partner with the team and the charity.
Good. What we'll do is we'll put up on the website exactly where people can get hold of you. What advice would you give to a young rider? I mean, we know the sacrifice is huge. You've talked about the money side of it. I'm sure it's a little bit better for top riders now, but it's not professional soccer. It's not Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo, etc. A sport where you have to be so dedicated. What advice or what do you do for your team about life after cycling?
I mean, we, in a team we do, because none of us really had opportunities when, that I guess formed this team. So we always look at the rider and at the individual in the team and what they can do beyond cycling. The nice thing with us and our partners, we intimately connect the riders to the partners, so to Dimension Data and to, we help them with their social media so they can build brands for themselves so that they potentially post their time with us. And our cycling team, that they, have a network that they can leverage, because your network then ultimately as a sports person can become your net worth. And
absolutely.
And we put pension aside for them. So we do a huge amount to make sure that they potentially, through injury or whatever, career stopping, they can actually then have the network and build on that and leverage those connections that they make through the team and the global racing around the world, that they can leverage that. And our partners are, they love the riders, they love what they can do. And that's why I said 50% of their value to me is on the bike, because if it was 100%, then I wouldn't really care what would happen post that. It would only be about their performance. We've tried to change the game a little bit. In cycling, it's not like in football where you sign 5-year contracts. Cycling is different. Everybody, and my compatriots in other teams, they look at it and they say, the shorter the contracts, the better, because you keep the riders working hard so that they deliver.
My goodness.
And for us, it's not like that. We don't hire and fire people. We have long-term contracts with our individuals because we want to build a brand around them, with us and with our team and with the charity. And I think that's critically important to us. So we are uniquely different in the world of cycling, but then, we didn't have 100 years of history and legacy. We came in from another continent and wanted to do things differently. And I think that's where, we've driven loyalty and we've created, a great space for them to do their best work. All we ask is that they get up every single day, motivated and driven. And I think the charity and the purpose that we have does that. Last year in the Tour de France, when Mark Cavendish crashed and was out, and then 2 days later, Edvald Boasson-Hagen loses to Marcel Kittel by, a spoke with, why was that? The depression in the team bus when Mark left the team and left the tour, when we were all in for him. Like I said, we don't often have a plan B. We were all in for him. What united us and brought us together was the fact that we weren't racing just for ourselves. We were racing for something that was, far more, I guess.
Not a collection of individuals, but a family. Is that
correct?
Fair?
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, Doug Ryder, thank you very much indeed. It's been a fascinating look into your world. We thank you very much indeed. Tell us something nobody knows about you. Oh, no, I'm actually pretty out there. I actually don't know. Come on. I'm running Comrades this weekend. Are you really? Yes. Fantastic. All right. Well, that's good enough for us. Doug Ryder, thank you very much indeed. Thanks. Wasn't that absolutely fascinating? The world of professional cycling. Thanks as always to Slow in the City for hosting us. Subscribe on iTunes or on your favorite podcast app and follow us on social media at TSE Advisory. See you next time. Cheers from John Robbie.